Hi, I'm Doug King with Presence, and it's my pleasure to be here today with Dr. Kurt Johnson, who is the co-author of the new book, The Coming Interspiritual Age, along with David Ord and the folks at Namaste Publishing. And Kurt, it's a real pleasure to have this time with you today.
My pleasure as well, Doug.
A lot of folks that I'll be introducing you to at Presence and our followers are going to want to know more about you. We've already recommended your book very highly to everyone, and they're getting it and reading it, but they weren't able to come with me to New York. We couldn't all fit on the plane and come up here and meet you in New York. So would you be kind enough to please give us a little background, especially the uniqueness of your background regarding science and then your religious and spiritual experiences and how they brought you to this place?
Sure. Yeah, it is interesting. I have kind of a peculiar pedigree, which has been a part of what's led me to this kind of work. I actually began, my scientific trajectory in graduate school and publishing in scientific journals, at quite a young age, even as a sophomore in undergraduate school. And then went on to get my doctorate in evolution, ecology, comparative biology, and systematics. And then was at the American Museum of Natural History for 25 years or so, and several other institutions that were a part of that affiliation, and doing publisher parish. So I've done about 200 juried articles in evolution and ecology and 7 technical books. Now, what's interesting is that a goodly part of that time I was also an Anglican monastic. I started out in an Anglican contemplative community and was there for a number of years, and then moved into ecumenical experiments that were evolving out of the emerging interfaith movement at that time. And so as that phenomenon was going on in the context of interfacing then with Buddhism and with Hinduism and with the indigenous traditions and Sufism, I ended up meeting and becoming very close friends with Brother Wayne Teasdale. And I think most people may know that names like Brother Wayne Teasdale, Bede Griffiths, Thomas Merton were the early straddlers of the Christian tradition, and particularly the Christian mystical tradition, with the mystical traditions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and so on. And the early people that started to see that the experiential part of what was going on there was the same, that the essential existential experience that people were having was really a common experience. So what evolved from that then, and it's interesting that this was in sync just with the 60s and what's called the beginning of the holistic and integrative epochs that we're in now, was the beginning of the trans-traditional dialogue, the interfaith dialogue, and eventually the interspiritual dialogue, where across all of these traditions people were talking about what they shared in their understanding of the profound interconnectedness of everything, the oneness of all reality, what that meant in the sense of our experience of heart and spirituality. And this was in tandem then with the revolution going on in science, which is generally known as the Popperian Revolution, which was bringing science into an age that great leaps of speculation could be made as long as they were testable. And science was moving out of the accumulation of evidence type of method to the far-reaching hypothesis method as long as you can test it. So if you look at almost all the breakthroughs in evolution, in genetics, in cosmology, in astronomy, and in physics, all these were really a result of being able to make even audacious statements about reality as long as they could be tested, and then to see what was actually true. Now, a good example of that today is the collider that's been built in Switzerland to test the predictions of string theory.
Yes.
Now, string theory, or what's now today modern M theory, is actually all math, and the math is actually so elegant and so compelling that the world's governments have put the money together to actually build this super collider wherein they could test, are those things really true? So what we're seeing then is this convergence into a holistic epoch or where the world's trying to go with one consistent interconnected view of not only what the earth is, but what we are. So I was very lucky then that my background, both in science and in spirituality, theology, comparative religion, philosophy, was just right in tandem with that. So actually the way the Coming Interspiritual Age came about was that Namaste publishers, who are most well known for publishing Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and A New Earth, actually came to me and asked me, could you try writing a book that tries to answer the question of what are all the meta trends that are going on now at a global level, both spiritually, in science, sociologically, social justice, economics, to show how this is trending at a global level and then what that implies. Right. And then the last point, just to keep it in the science, is that what we're really talking about here are anthropological thresholds for this species, Homo sapiens. Right. In other words, how is our species going to be skillful at a global level of civilization? And that has brought every challenge imaginable: global climate change, resource competition, national allegiances and the weapons of mass destruction, every aspect of the potential shadow of globalization. So all of this has been happening at once, and myself and many others who are in this holistic conversation are just lucky enough that our professional backgrounds really prepared us to be a part of that discussion.
Yeah, and I would say that that's, of course, in our minds, more divine providence than it is a coincidence, and I would say that would also be the same explanation we would give for the universe itself. So, in that regard, if I can talk just a little bit from the theological/philosophical side, we've had some meetings here in New York talking about the nature of the biblical narrative from our point of view at presence, and the fact that we see it really as a history of the evolution of spiritual consciousness. And as you well know, I've overlaid the model of spiral dynamics, showing the early views and understandings of God as an other, and the movement from form to formlessness as a move into second-tier consciousness. Could you maybe share your impressions of that, and especially for the folks that have followed us in that, what you see as the credibility of that kind of thinking?
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. When I first met Doug, and then I went out to Colorado Springs so that I could meet him in person, and then have brought him to New York to meet, many of our fellow travelers at a gathering we've had here for the last 4 or 5 days. It was really because in Presence's visioning of going transform that we identified then the exact thing that interspirituality is talking about in what's producing this global understanding that religion and spirituality, if they're going to step up to the global civilization, are no longer going to have to be able to be bound by boundaries, but are going to have to see that their future is beyond form, and in a situation in which forms serve everyone, yes, but everyone is not caught in those forms in the sense of competition, conflict, absolute claims about reality, salvific claims, whatever those things may be. Those have been the causes of conflict in the past. So in Presence's understanding that we're actually evolving from being caught in form to going transform and being free of those boundaries, that's actually the message of interspirituality itself. And of course what we see is that interspirituality grew out of interfaith, yeah, because it was precisely saying all of these forms have been parochial, now we have to come to a place where they're at a global level and they're seen as serving everyone, and they're no longer exclusive in that competitive way.